Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Master of Seduction by Kinley Macgregor, narrated by Will Thorne. 1. The Diary of Lady Ashton, 1775.
Black Jack Rhys is the fiercest pirate to ever roam the raging seas. Every sailor alive fears to mention his name aloud, lest it summon him up from the very bowels of hell. 'Tis said to see his ship is to see your death, for he gives no quarter, shows no mercy. Once his prey is spotted, he is relentless in his pursuit, and will not cease until he claims his prize. Jack Rhys is a man possessed of a mysterious legend, a man possessed of numerous talents. Tonight I have met said man, and discovered for myself just how hypnotic a creature he is. Aye, he is fierce and wild and untamed, but more than that, he is a spectacular specimen of manliness, and though I ache to have him for my own, I know only too well that no woman shall ever claim him. With a sigh in my heart, I have resigned myself to the fact that I spent but one glorious night with the Master of Seduction. For one moment in time, I held the unattainable and tasted the full delights of my gender. There is no other man who can come close to matching Jack Rhys, and so I end this small entry with the same sad note that I ended last night. Farewell, Jack Rhys. May you always avoid the gallows.
Charleston, South Carolina, 1780. This was her night of supreme triumph. Lorelei Dupree smiled in satisfaction as Justin Wallingford whirled her about the crowded dance floor. After all these years of waiting, of knowing deep inside her heart that he was the only man for her, she had finally heard his proposal. And what a proposal it had been! Wearing his immaculate British uniform, Justin had tapped on his wineglass with his monocle until he'd held everyone's undivided attention. Then the haughty, much sought-after lieutenant had begged for her hand in the presence of Charleston's social elite. Oh, but it was a glorious evening. She would treasure the memory for the rest of her life. As the music finished and she left the dance floor on Justin's arm, Lorelei caught the pleasure in her father's smile. In his mid-60s, Sir Charles Dupree, the most renowned Tory in Charleston, still held the striking handsomeness that had marked his youth. With his powdered wig rolled in the latest fashion and wearing his dark blue jacket with the heavy gold embroidery, he looked quite dashing. "I shall fetch us a cup of punch," Justin offered before leaving her side. As he made his way through the crowd, several men clapped him on the back and nodded in her direction. Lorelei paused before her father.
"You're looking smug this evening," she teased.
His smile widened. "And you, little Laurie Angel," he said, taking her extended hand and bestowing a fatherly kiss on the backs of her knuckles, "are as breathtaking as your mother." She blushed at his compliment. He kept her hand in his and held it tightly. He'd done that much tonight, as if fearing her coming marriage would somehow separate them. But Lorelei knew better. Nothing could ever come between her and her beloved father. It was her St. George who'd slain every evil dragon that had haunted her childhood. "How is it Justin has left you free for this dance? I thought you promised it to him alone," he asked. She raised her white lace fan to her face and whispered behind it,
"I'm afraid I'm the one to blame, Father. My toes needed time to recuperate."
He laughed. It was common knowledge that Justin, a man of numerous talents, had never mastered the art of dancing.
"If you'll please excuse me," she said, reluctantly withdrawing her hand. "I see Amanda and Annabeth heading out to the balcony. I must speak with them."
"Ever as you wish, sweetest." That had always been his answer to any request, large or small. Lorelei gave him a quick peck on the cheek before she skirted through the groups on the edge of the ballroom floor to seek out her friends. The cool breeze outside was fragrant with magnolias as it whispered through the sculpted shrubs that surrounded the balcony. Crickets and frogs sang to the night, while Amanda, Annabeth, and Martha fanned their flushed cheeks in the privacy of the ivy-covered balcony. Annabeth was the daughter of the local magistrate. Fair of face, she was pleasingly plump and had a cheerful disposition. Tall and thin, with brown eyes, Martha had been Lorelei's very first friend, and the ever-beautiful, perfectly coiffed Amanda was either Lorelei's closest friend or her worst enemy, depending on the mood they were in.
"Oh, Lorelei," Annabeth breathed as she joined them. "You're so lucky to have Justin dote on you so." "Aye," Martha agreed. "I think he's the most handsome man at the party."
Lorelei looked to where her fiancé stood inside with a group of other British regulars. His father had commissioned Justin's lieutenant rank just last year. He was a handsome man, tall of frame and slight of build. He had laughing blue eyes and was probably second only to her father when it came to indulging Lorelei's whims. The two of them had known each other all their lives, and she looked forward to spending the rest of her life with him. Amanda poked her arm with her closed pink fan.
"Be warned, Laurie," she said, her tone dire. "My mother told me a woman only has a month after the wedding before her husband tires of her and seeks another conquest. What will you do when Justin no longer responds to your charms?"
Lorelei laughed and brushed Amanda's words aside with a cheerful reprisal.
"Not respond to my charms? Surely you jest. There's not a man born I can't wrap around my little finger."
She lifted up her hand and quirked her pinky finger to illustrate her point. Amanda rolled her eyes.
"You have a high opinion of yourself, Miss Dupree."
Lorelei recognized the swipe Amanda was taking by reminding her of her less-than-noble heritage compared to Justin's impeccable lineage. The fact that Lorelei's mother had been born of a notorious illicit affair was more than well known. Not one to be insulted, even subtly, Lorelei arched a brow at the fragile blonde.
"It may be arrogant to you, Lady Amanda, but I know the secret of how to handle a man."
"Oh?" Amanda asked, her face a mockery of a surprised expression.
"Then please," she said, extending her arms as if to receive a great gift of enlightenment, "do tell us this incredible secret."
Annabeth and Martha stopped fanning themselves and leaned closer in their eagerness to hear Lorelei's every word. Lorelei smiled mischievously, then let fall her greatest weapon.
"The secret is, you must treat a man like a dog."
Annabeth gaped.
"A man is like a dog, you say?"
Lorelei brought her hand up to her lips to remind Annabeth to keep her voice down. Though Lorelei and her friends were alone in the shadowy alcove of the balcony, anyone could walk within hearing range, most especially one of their nosy chaperones.
"You're telling us that we are to treat a man like a lapdog,"
Annabeth repeated, careful this time to keep her tone low enough for only their group.
"Exactly,"
Lorelei repeated.
"In order to keep a man loyal, you have to treat him and train him very much like you would a pampered pet." "Who told you this?"
Martha demanded. Lorelei knew her eyes must be twinkling with her mirth.
"My mother told me the secret when I was but 12. 'Twas the same secret her mother had given her, and it works. I tell you, I've had nothing but success with the method." "My mother says petulance and pouting work best for bending a man to your whims," Amanda contradicted.
Lorelei bit back the reminder that Amanda's father was a known lecher who kept 2 mistresses in town. Unlike Amanda, she would never be so cruel as to embarrass her friend with such a statement.
"Fine, then. You use your method, and I'll continue mine."
Martha glanced inside the open doors to where Justin stood in a regal pose as he lectured the soldiers in his group.
"I'd like to hear more of this theory," she said to Lorelei. "After all, you're the only one to ever attract the notice of Justin Wallingford."
"Aye," Annabeth agreed. Lorelei cast a quick glance inside to make sure no one could hear, then drew her friends closer.
"Very well. Remember what we were told as children about dogs. Never show them any fear. They can smell it and it makes them mean. Men are the same. They know when a woman is afraid and they use it to control you." "Yes, but some of them are vicious by nature," Martha said. "As are some dogs,"
Annabeth added, pleased with herself that she caught the metaphor. Lorelei nodded.
"As with a pet, you must make sure you establish from the beginning exactly who's in control."
Amanda smirked.
"Everyone knows the man is in charge. Why bother? The man doesn't have to be."
Annabeth's blue eyes widened, Martha's mouth fell open, and Amanda fluttered her fan in annoyance.
"What are you saying, Laurie?" Annabeth whispered. "That we are in charge? That's scandalous," Martha gasped. "Who ever heard of such?" "Who runs the household?" Lorelei asked, ignoring Martha's question. "We do, of course," Martha and Annabeth answered in unison. "And who makes sure the man is kept comfortable, served his favorite foods and such?"
They exchanged puzzled looks.
"The wife, correct," Lorelei prompted. "She makes sure her husband is treated with the proper regard, and she's the one who sees after his care, just like you would do a treasured pup."
Annabeth frowned.
"I suppose that's true." "Thank you," Lorelei said. "Now, if you wish to train a man to listen to you, you never shout, you whisper. They take extra special care to listen to a quiet tone while they automatically shut out loud ones. And just like you would a dog, when he comes at your bidding, you reward him. That way, he'll always come instead of ignoring you or putting you off. This is ridiculous. Amanda spoke again. Justin would die if he heard any of this from you, and I shan't listen to any more of this nonsense. Snapping her lace fan closed, she lifted her head haughtily and returned to the party. Lorelei shrugged away her rancor. No matter what she thinks, I tell you there's never been a man born I can't handle. You've seen it yourselves. When it comes to men, I could write a book of lessons. Annabeth sighed forlornly, her large bosom heaving with the weight of it. I wish I knew how to handle a man. As do I, Martha chimed in. I always get flustered whenever one comes near me. Martha looked past Lorelei's shoulder, and her pale face flooded with colour. Lorelei turned her head to see Justin standing in the open doorway with 2 cups of punch in his hands. The light from inside shadowed most of his face, but even so there was no mistaking the half-peeved, half-shocked look on his face. "Excuse me," Martha and Annabeth said as they gathered their skirts and rushed back to the party. Justin arched a brow at Lorelei as he sauntered onto the balcony and placed their cups on the narrow ledge. "A dog, am I?" he asked, humour dancing in the blue depths of his eyes. Instead of being mortified, Lorelei laughed. "Here, Fido, come, sit." He dutifully sat on the marbled railing where she'd patted her hand, then gave a soft canine whine. Her smile widening, she gave him a quick pat on his powdered wig. "Good boy." He reached out and pulled her into his arms. "Give me a kiss, wench." Shaking her head, Lorelei placed her hands on his biceps and removed his arms from her. "Absolutely not." He sighed and became instantly peevish. He reluctantly released her. "Why not?" "There's a party inside you, cad. Someone might see." He scoffed, then scooted off the railing. Reaching out, he took one of her curls between his fingers and rubbed it with his thumb. "You've caused quite the scandal by not wearing a wig tonight." She pulled back from his grasp so that her hair was removed from his hand. "'Tis the latest fashion," she said defensively. "I read that no one will be wearing a wig by this time next year." "Don't be so testy. I think your hair is quite pleasing." "Thank you." She took her citrus punch from the railing and sipped it. Justin grew quiet for a moment while the music and voices swirled around them. When he spoke, she had to strain to hear him. "Do you have an answer for me yet? When you help me catch a pirate?" She cradled the porcelain cup in her hand. So that was what had been on his mind this night, his stupid wager against Roger Tilden about which of them could capture the nefarious Black Jack Rhys. It was a foolish wager in her opinion, not that Justin ever asked her opinion, mind you. But far be it from her not to participate in such an adventure. "Do you have to ask? You know how much I love intrigue." His face relaxed. "Then tomorrow night I've already arranged everything with the tavern's owner. We'll tell your father I'm taking you to the play." She tried to look stern with him, but she had a terrible feeling she failed miserably to hide the gleam in her eyes. "How did you know I would go along with your mad plan?" "As you said, I know how much you love intrigue, and I knew you were only making me wait for your answer to torment me with your usual grace." "Laurie? Justin?" Her father's deep, authoritative voice broke them apart. "Don't you think it's time to return inside?" Lorelei snapped open her fan with a flick of her wrist as Justin offered her his arm. Side by side, they stepped into the ballroom. To her immediate consternation, Justin led her to the dance floor, where he set about trampling her feet. It seemed an eternity had passed before the song ended and she could send him for more punch. Morgan Drake paused in the doorway of the grand party with his notorious friend by his side. The people here tonight, most especially the British Royal Navy, which hunted Black Jack Rhys on a regular basis, would be stunned to learn he was in their midst. But then Jack thrived on danger. He defied death at every turn with a bitter, taunting laugh. How many times had Morgan seen the man walk up and shake the hand of whatever official had just sworn to catch that black-hearted pirate or die in that effort? The one saving grace that kept Jack from the gallows was that he wasn't what he seemed. In this party of nobility, high officials, and spies, Jack Rhys wore the arrogant stoicism, powdered wig, and court dress as if he'd been born to it.
He'd come to this party with his only friend, Morgan Drake, devout patriot, and, in Jack's opinion, devout fool. But Morgan didn't mind his friend's epitaph, for he knew the truth of Black Jack Rhys. Jack Rhys had a heart. It was a heart Jack did his damnedest to deny, a heart he'd tell anyone he'd been born without. But Jack had known the man too long and had seen him act contrary to his words too many times not to know the truth of it. Morgan took a glass of sherry from a passing servant. He waited until they were alone before he turned to Jack. "What name will you be using tonight?" he asked. "Count Arnulf Habsburg, I think." Morgan's lips quirked up in humor at one of Jack's old favorites. "From Bulgaria?" "Why, yes, young pup," he said, croaking his voice in an authentic accent. Bulgarian was one of about 15 languages Jack spoke fluently. "Is there any other save moi?" "Very well, Count. I shall leave you momentarily to find your bedmate." Jack's gaze narrowed speculatively. Morgan turned his head to see an attractive redhead quickly fanning herself next to a group of matrons. Her vivid hair color stood out among all the white and pastel-colored wigs the rest of the crowd wore, and that marked her independence even more clearly than her choice of fanning. "I wouldn't have thought her your type." Jack tipped his glass back and drained it. "Since when do you know my type?" His voice was scarce more than a growl meant to intimidate. But Morgan knew, in spite of Jack's words and angry tone, Jack had never taken a virgin, nor would he do so tonight. He might dance with the girl, even pass a few words with her, but in the end he would go off with a hungry widow. Jack, for all his caution, was a devout creature of habit. "Happy hunting," Morgan said to him as he spotted the patriot spy he'd come to the party to meet. "I'll see you back at my ship in the morning." Jack inclined his head in a subtle nod, his gaze still riveted by the woman before him as he placed his empty glass on the tray of a passing servant. Her dress was a pale yellow silk, opened in front to show a quilted yellow panel. The low square neckline showed off the top of creamy breasts he could well imagine taking in his hand, and her long, graceful neck. Jack had always been partial to a woman's throat, to the feel of her heartbeat teasing his lips as her heart raced in response to his expert touch. In his opinion, it was one of the most erotic places on a female body. There was only one part he liked to taste more. She darted rather quickly out of her current group and crossed the room to stand with 2 couples. Her harried movements reminded him of a dove being pursued by some beast as it tried to find a safe place to rest. He smiled. Morgan had been right. She wasn't his usual type. He liked his women tall, thin, and breathtaking. Though attractive, she wasn't the classical beauty who normally turned men's heads, and if he didn't miss his guess, her pale skin was splashed with freckles her white powder couldn't hide. But there was something striking about this woman. She had hair as dark and rich as mahogany, with golden streaks laced through. She possessed an aura of warmth and happiness that seemed to glow from within her. Watching her, he felt like a wilted flower that had just received a ray of sunshine after a long, cold winter. It was a strange feeling, one he'd never before known, and he found himself wondering about the color of her eyes. Lorelei had spent the last 20 minutes avoiding her next promised dance with Justin. He would have the rest of their lives to stomp her toes, but if she were to carry out his ruse on the morrow, she would need both her feet intact. Seeing him rise on the tips of his toes to scan the crowd for her, she ducked and moved to stand with Amanda's mother, Lady Whitney, who was talking to the Dowager Mrs. Darcy.
"My dear,"
Lady Whitney asked Lorelei, her face pinched with worry as she gave her a regal perusal.
"are you all right?" "I feel a little faint,"
Lorelei offered as an excuse for her odd behavior. Mrs. Darcy touched her lightly on the arm.
"I know exactly what you mean, Laurie. I regret that I had my maid lace my stays so tightly tonight, been near fainting myself."
With an imperial flick of her hand, Lady Whitney motioned for Amanda to join them. Once Amanda was there, Lady Whitney turned to Lorelei.
"Can you have your father arrange an introduction for Amanda to meet Count Habsburg?"
"Count who?" Lorelei and Amanda asked simultaneously.
"Count Arnulf Habsburg,"
Mrs. Darcy said with a childish giggle. She put her gloved hand up to shield her mouth as she spoke in a loud whisper.
"Why, girls, don't tell me you haven't seen him." "I don't remember a Count Arnulf Habsburg being on the guest list,"
Lorelei said, wondering who the stranger was.
"Well, someone must have brought him," Mrs. Darcy said excitedly. "I heard he's descended from the royal family."
Lady Whitney lifted her chin and looked down her hook nose to Mrs. Darcy.
"I have no doubt. You can see his good breeding. 'Twould be obvious to anyone that he is royal."
Lorelei and Amanda exchanged frowns. Then there was a flurry of feminine voices near them, some of them quite silly and high-pitched.
"Count Habsburg is coming this way," someone said. "Pass me my smelling salts." "He's going to ask someone to dance," another woman said. "Please let it be me," the first woman begged.
Lorelei strained to see this mysterious count, but she was too short to see over the high wigs of the older women. In fact, she couldn't even tell from which direction he was supposed to be coming.
"He's after my Amanda,"
Lady Whitney said, her voice filled with glee.
"Pinch your cheeks, dear, and for heaven's sake straighten up."
As Lorelei searched the crowd for the newcomer, she caught Justin's eye. He raised his eyebrows in relief, smiled, and headed straight for her. Oh, bother, he was after her now. Her toes twitched in memory of those polished black boots crushing them.
"Excuse me, please,"
she said to her group as she sought to find another safe corner of the room. Lorelei was still looking back over her shoulder to where Justin was making strides through the crowd when she suddenly ran into a wall. Only it wasn't a wall, she realized, as she placed a hand upon it to steady herself. It was a broad, rock-hard chest. Her sight focused on the elegant black silk double-breasted cutaway beneath her hand. She slowly trailed her gaze up the embroidered cream waistcoat to his stand-full collar, the stark white and lace-edged stock, and then to his...
Oh, my!
Eyes of pewter stared down out of a face she'd never before seen in reality. It was the face of some perfect ancient statue. His features sharp and angular, there was something predatorial in his gaze, something that reminded her of a hawk watching a hare it wanted desperately to devour. He gave her a smile that turned her legs to jelly. "Forgive me, mademoiselle," he said, in a deep, stunning timbre, his voice rich with a foreign accent. Lorelei wanted to respond, but for the first time in her life, words failed her. "I trust you're unharmed?" he asked. She returned his beguiling smile, her throat finally loosening enough for her to speak.
Fine, thank you. I only hope I didn't offend you too much with my clumsiness."
He gave a low, rich laugh that made her insides flutter. "Please, feel free to run into my arms any time you feel the urge." "There you are, Laurie," Justin said, coming up to stand beside her. His gaze raked the stranger with malice, and it was only then she realized her hand hadn't left the man's chest. Lorelei jerked her hand away with a very undignified gasp. "I don't believe I know you, sir," Justin said with ice in his voice as he forced himself between her and the man. "Count," the man corrected in a voice every bit as arctic. "Count Arnulf Habsburg." Arnulf turned his gaze to Lorelei, and she grew warm inside at his heated perusal. "And you, mademoiselle?" She sensed the anger and jealousy in Justin, but too much a gentleman to show anything save proper manners, he answered for her. "Allow me to present my," he paused for emphasis, "fiance, Miss Lorelei Dupree." Nervously, Lorelei extended her hand to the Count and gave a proper curtsy. His warm hand covered hers. Long, tapered, and well-manicured, his fingers were obviously those of a gentleman, and yet she felt rough calluses on his palm that belied the noble title. He bowed low before her upraised hand. His warm breath tickled her flesh, sending chills all the way up her arm, and when his lips touched the back of her hand, he gave an impudent nip with his teeth. Startled, she felt her blood race through her veins and straight to a foreign part of her body that thrummed in sudden need. "'Tis the greatest pleasure to meet you, mademoiselle," he said in that voice that wavered somewhere between thunder and warm honey. When he neglected to release her hand immediately, Justin clicked his heels together and made a curt bow to draw the Count's attention. "I am Lieutenant Justin Wallingford." Immediately, the Count dropped her hand. His features grew still and masked, and some heated emotion sparked within the Count's eyes. It was raw and primeval, and if Lorelei didn't know better, she'd swear it was hatred. "So, you're the youngest son of Gabriel Wallingford?" "You know my father?" Justin asked, stiffening his spine with pride. The Count's smile was cold, formal. "Why, yes, I do. He's an old family friend." There was definitely something hidden in those words. Lorelei was certain of it. The Count continued to scan the crowd. "Is he by chance here this evening?" Justin shook his head. "He's not due back into port for another week." Disappointment flashed across the Count's features an instant before he hid the emotion. "Pity." The Count turned to face Lorelei. "I see the dancers are getting ready for the next set. Might I have the pleasure of your company, Miss Dupree?" "Lorelei doesn't like to dance," Justin inserted before she could even part her lips to respond. The Count ignored him and gave her a bold, assessing look. "Mademoiselle."
"I would love to,"
Lorelei said before she thought better of it. By the look on Justin's face, she could tell it was the wrong answer. So be it. She could handle him well enough. He would forgive her on the morrow. He always did. She took the Count's proffered arm, and he led her to the floor. As soon as they took their places, the music started. Surrounded by his strong arms, Lorelei felt jittery and nervous, like a young girl facing her first dance at her debutante ball. The Count's appealing scent of sandalwood and ash filled her head. With every precise, perfect step he took, she could feel the raw power of him. He was like a caged lion, just waiting for the chance to pounce as he swept her around the floor. Against the dandies and pale faces of the crowd, his tanned, handsome face stood out. But it was more than that. There was definitely something dangerous about this man, as if he were hiding something from her. She could feel it deep within her soul. Was he a patriot spy, or perhaps a double agent working for England? He could even be one of the blockade runners that had been flooding into Charleston since the British had overtaken the port city and sealed it off.
"Have you been in the colonies long?"
she asked. "I've never been anywhere long."
"Not even Bulgaria?"
"Lately," he added with a disarming smile. "I haven't been anywhere long lately." Again, she sensed he was hiding something from her, and she was determined to find out what.
"Might I be so bold as to ask who invited you to the party?"
His eyes danced with humor. "I don't want to talk about me, mademoiselle. Tell me about you."
"Me?"
she asked with a frown. "Yes. Tell me how an enchanting creature such as yourself became engaged to a pasty-faced Englishman." Anger flared, and she sputtered for a moment.
"Justin is not pasty-faced."
He looked to where Justin stood to the side of the floor, watching them like a cat protecting its kitten. "He is no match for you, milovidnost."
"I don't understand that last word."
"It's Bulgarian, and you're avoiding my point." Regaining her lost composure, she looked up at him from under her lashes. Lorelei was a master when it came to the art of flirtation, and she knew the ploy he was using. It was one she'd confronted numerous times, disparaged the competition. How many times had a man belittled the object of her affection while holding himself up as the very model of her perfect mate? Taking the upper hand, she decided to spoil his advantage.
"And just what sort of man would you suggest for me?"
she asked coyly.
"Yourself, perhaps."
His arms tensed around her, and his eyes turned dull. "Forgive me, mademoiselle. I have overstepped my bounds." He broke off their dance and left her standing in the middle of the ballroom looking after his departing form. Lorelei frowned. He wasn't supposed to do that. She'd assumed he would pass words with her, not leave her standing in the middle of her party like some discarded kerchief. Of all the bizarre men. Justin approached her and led her from the floor. "Is anything amiss?" Lorelei shook her head as she glanced back to where the Count had vanished. How could she possibly explain to Justin this strange feeling inside her? Dare she tell him that for one mere instant she'd actually been attracted to another man? 2. The following night, the noisy tavern was filled with smoke and more unwashed bodies than Lorelei had ever smelled in her entire life. For the last 2 hours she'd been avoiding hairy hands and thwarting rude advances as she listened to the seamen's conversations for any telltale word of Jack Rhys. It was sort of eerie, really, when she thought about it. One of these men could be the pirate who was rumored to have killed more men than the pox that had ravaged Charleston the year before. Why, he could be that short man in his 50s at the bar who kept looking at her, or the young man sitting alone by the fire as he nestled up with a tankard of ale. Perhaps he was the solitary man in the corner who kept checking the door every time it opened. What would such a man look like? Would he be tall or short, dark-haired or fair? Surely such brutality would show on his face, wouldn't it? Lorelei approached the table where her latest 4 cups.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?